Kansas City Chiefs select Travis Kelce.
Chris Jones, defensive tackle, Mississippi State.
Patrick Mahomes, the second quarterback.
Hey, this is Brett Veach from the Kansas City Chiefs. How you doing?
Mecole Hardman, Juan Thornhill,
Clyde Edwards.
I'm ready to work, Coach. You know that.
I'm ready, man. I'm ready now.
The Kansas City Chiefs are now on the clock.
And what a weekend it was. Hi, everybody. Mitch Holthus with you, voice of the Chiefs, along with Chiefs reporter Matt McMullen. I love the open that we run to relive the times when some of the greatest players now on this Chiefs team were chosen in the draft in their respective draft years. But, man, this draft class now, as we look at the 6 guys that were selected in the draft, Matt, there's a lot of things that come to mind. We want to kind of give you a overall view of this draft class, take a look ahead, what's happened in free agency. We're going to hear in just a few minutes from Chiefs General Manager Brett Veach. But, Matt, I think the rest of the NFL would agree with us, because that's most of the feedback is the value in this 2021 Chiefs draft class.
So you look at a draft class, you look at lots of different things, and we'll go through those different traits you look for. You want good players, for one thing, obviously, but the value is so important, how the board falls and how you react to it, and the value was really there for the Chiefs in this draft. And the reason the value is there is because they could go best player available. That's what you always want to do, and that's the beauty of the Orlando Brown Jr. trade. Didn't have to go get an offensive tackle at all in this draft. They could go out and address other areas where the board felt to them. They found value, and we'll get to some names, obviously, but a few here. Nick Bolton, Creed Humphrey. Bolton for sure could have been a first-round pick. He falls to the bottom of the second round. Humphrey could have been an early second-round pick. Falls to the bottom of the second round. And Trey Smith, the guard from Tennessee, falls to the 6th round. Could be the absolute steal of the draft. We'll talk about him later, but tons of value in this class.
Cornell Powell, the wide receiver from Clemson, too, as you kind of dig into him, and we will later in the show, you're realizing, wow, he got all the way to the 6th round. How did that happen? Because he can really help this team, and we'll tell you why in a minute. But overall, too, when you also dig into this 6-man class, there's a lot more than meets the eye, or look at the measurables or pro days or 40 times.
So those things are important, but you can't just rely on those and look at those. This draft class also has energy and athleticism. 2 important things when you're coming from a whole different coaching staff in college, getting them in this building, and what can you do with that? You can't teach those things, energy and athleticism. We'll start with energy. Nick Bolton. Does anyone have more energy than Nick Bolton on the football field? I don't think so. And you think about the defensive players the Chiefs brought in a few years ago to change the culture of that defense, guys like Frank Clark and Tyrann Mathieu. I think Nick Bolton has that kind of energy, and he'll be out there like a Tasmanian devil on the field. He's been described that way, both on defense and special teams, so that's important. Creed Humphrey also has that energy. He'll bring an edge to the offensive line, I believe. Then athleticism, Joshua Kaindoh. Is there anyone more athletic on earth than Joshua Kaindoh? You think about his length, 6'6", 260 pounds, 34.5-inch arms, crazy athlete. He's the kind of player that you look at his production in college, some of the numbers aren't jumping off the page at you, but get him in this building, get your coaches with him and see what they can do with him. You can't teach athleticism. He has that. Now just teach him the technique and the way to get after the passer could be the total package there with Kaindoh.
And showing you some video here of Nick Bolton and just his ability in coverage. We're going to get into Nick more later in the show, but you get excited. One of the big plays that he made, the consistent plays that he made. But let's talk quickly about Creed Humphrey in a second, more than meets the eye. And we'll get into this more in depth later in the show, but their season was on the brink. K-State beat them in Norman, and they were reeling. And it was Creed Humphrey that rallied that team. And so not only can he be the center for a long time for Patrick Mahomes, but he becomes an energy creator as a member of the offensive line, and you don't see that always on the offensive line.
One thing you worry about with players that have always had success is when they come into a situation like at the NFL, you're going to face adversity at some point. How do they respond to that? And when they've already dealt with that in college and they've been one of those anchors, one of those guys that other guys can look to for leadership when things aren't going well, you know those guys have the right head on their shoulders to deal with adversity in the NFL. And wherever that may be, the Chiefs are the best team in football every year, it seems like, the last several years with Patrick Mahomes. But they're going to run into adversity, and you need guys to respond to that. And think about the comebacks in the playoffs over the years. 24 points down to the Houston Texans in the divisional round of the playoffs back in 2019. You need guys with heads on their shoulders where, hey, we're not out of this game. And Creed Humphrey's that kind of guy.
Yeah, we're seeing his highlights here, but it also leads me to ask you about one thing that we've learned from Andy Reid in the 8 seasons he's been here, and that is he loves versatile players, whether it's on offense or defense, the more that you can do. But when I look at this class, this 6-member class, the 2021 draft class, I see that here.
definitely. I mean, look at guys like Creed Humphrey, who we just talked about. He's a center, but he's 6'5", 320 pounds. He's massive for a center, so that means he has versatility to play guard as well. You can bounce him into either guard spot, and he could play that spot well. Other guys like Trey Smith, he's technically a guard, but he's played all over the offensive line throughout his time in college. He was a left tackle as a freshman at Tennessee, first freshman left tackle in 30 years at the University of Tennessee, so he can do that at 6'5", 321 pounds. Then also Noah Gray at tight end. He played all over the place for Duke last year, 237 snaps in the slot, 139 snaps in line, and 120 snaps in the backfield as an H-back. So these guys can do all these different things for you. You can't just pigeonhole them into one spot because they can do tons of different things, and that's what you want. We've seen that over the course of the offseason, getting versatile players who can do different things for you, offensively and defensively.
We're going to talk more about Trey Smith and Creed Humphrey later in the show. We're waiting the press conference from Chiefs General Manager Brett Veach. We will take you right to the podium when he's ready to go there. But you just mentioned versatility with two offensive linemen that, again, great value picks. But in less than 90 days, let's go back to Super Bowl 55, and it's well documented how Patrick Mahomes was running for 500 yards for his life. But in less than 90 days, what was perceived as a weakness, or at the very least an uncertainty, Brett Veach has made now into the deepest offensive line in the entire NFL in less than 90 days.
And how fun is that? I mean, that's what the beauty of this front office and this coaching staff, I've said this all weekend, is the Chiefs are never complacent with success. I mean, things have gone really well here over the last several years, and it would be really easy for a lot of organizations to be like, well, we have some issues up front, but, you know, we have Patrick Mahomes. We'll figure it out. Yeah. No, they address these problems like crazy. And we'll just go through all the different names here along the offensive line because training camp is going to be so much fun watching these guys duke it out. So left tackle, Orlando Brown Jr., 24 years old, one of the top tackles in all of football, only going to get better. Joe Thuney at left guard, all-pro left guard. Pencil him in. He's never missed a start in his career. The guy's perfect for that spot. He's your left guard. Now it gets really interesting. So you have at center, you have Creed Humphrey, who we've talked about, can be the center for this team for hopefully the next 10 years. Second-round pick, stud. Also Austin Blythe, though, a guy that's, I think, played 42 of 43, started 42 of the last 43 games in his career over the last couple seasons. He can play guard or center.
And with the Rams, they won a lot of games with him.
Exactly. Very reliable center. Went to the Super Bowl with Austin Blythe. Then Darrell Williams, one of your guys. He's a kind of a project player out of Mississippi State, but Darrell Williams can play center for this team if needed. Now look at right guard. Kyle Long came out of retirement to play for this team. Heck of an edge to him. He can play tackle as well. A whole year removed from football. He's healthy, ready to go. He's a Pro Bowl caliber player. Laurent Duvernay-Tardif, he's coming back. We know what LDT can do. Trey Smith, we've talked about him. Steal the draft, perhaps. Andrew Wiley, Nick Allegretti. Then look at right tackle. Lucas Niang, kind of part of this draft class in a sense, at a TCU, a third-round pick last year, opted out, but we're very excited about him. Mike Rimmers, Martinez Rankin, Yasir Durant. All of those names, all of those guys, you could pencil them in. If they're playing, you're like, all right, I feel pretty good about that, or they have an upside that you're excited about. That's incredible. And that's why watching these guys duke it out in camp and compete is not just going to be exciting to watch. It's going to make whoever the starting five is in week one better.
Matt, I ran out of hands. 14 guys. We were counting them off as you were. 14 guys. Normally, an NFL team would keep 8/9 on the 53-man roster. That's all you can keep, and 9's too many almost. You're only going to have 7 active on game day. Coach Reed has proven that with the offense that they run and what you need at other slots. And you just mentioned 14 guys. That tells you training camp every day. And honestly, I'm going to go whatever the OSPs, the OTAs, the minicamps look like. We're still trying to define that, right? There's a lot of discussion between the league and the NFLPA. But the offensive line, with all of that depth, now becomes a daily discussion on how does that 14 turn into 9 or 8 and the 7 on game day.
It's going to be a lot of fun to watch, and really 3 traits describe all of these guys and this group as a whole, and you can see this theme throughout the rebuild of the offensive line. First of all, talent. These guys are good. We know that. Pro Bowls, All-Pro nominations, just being out there at all shows that these guys are talented, good players that you want along your offensive line. But then perhaps the 2 most important things, durability. Think about the guys they brought in here like Thuney, Brown, Creed Humphrey at Oklahoma had over 2,000 snaps under his belt. Austin Blythe, I mentioned him, 42 games over the last several years. These guys are durable. You know that you can rely on them. They don't get injured. They're out there no matter what. And also versatile. I keep saying that over and over again, but versatility is so important, especially up front. These guys aren't just tackles. They aren't just guards. They aren't just centers. They're guys that are centers or guards or tackles with the versatility to play at least one other position, where if you have some injuries, if these durable guys I'm talking about do get hurt, you can count on others to step in. When you're signing a guy in free agency or drafting him, they're not just one thing. There's several things, and that's huge.
And Coach Reed, it goes back to your athleticism. He asked, and Andy Heck asked their offensive linemen to move. These offensive linemen are moving all the time. We talk about the Chiefs having the best screen game in the entire NFL. I mean, there's 1,000 screens that Andy Reid sets up to run. To do that, your linemen must move and have a sense of timing. That goes back to your athleticism. When you look at what a Rodney Hudson did in his first couple of years when he was in Andy Reid's system, go back to the 2013 game at Philadelphia. The Chiefs crushed the Eagles there, going back there this year, because of the screen game, and the Eagles still haven't figured it out. And so those linemen must be able to move. Your tackles have to move. Unfortunately, think about the play that Eric Fisher was hurt on in the AFC Championship game. He's downfield 30 yards looking to block. And so this group that they put together, those 14 guys for the most part, fit that requirement of their ability to be able to move with athleticism.
Now, off of that, we saw Eric Fisher catch a touchdown last year. Of this group, who's going to catch a touchdown this year? Somebody probably will, right?
Yeah, Niang will want to. Creed Humphrey will want to, except you can't make the center eligible. You can if you run the old lonesome polecat, because the end guy, here's your football rules, the end guy is eligible. But you got to tell everybody, hey, tackle eligible, center eligible. Let's throw it to Creed and just put everybody on the outside. He's your outside offensive lineman. That's a good idea. In fact, some people run it crazy. The Jets ran it against us a couple years ago. Now, just to gloss over here, over the next several days, the Chiefs will also announce the undrafted free agents. And I'm curious if Brett Veach, and again, we're going to go to him very shortly at the podium, will discuss that at all, because they start to filter in here. Basically, social media has ruined the UDFA announcements because they announce them themselves, or their schools announce them. But we won't announce them today because you have to go through medicals. There's a lot of process there. But again, as a fan, don't glaze over that list of guys, because as we ask the question, who among the six-man draft class will have impact in 2021 and the years beyond on Patrick Mahomes' second lap, as I call it, the next 4 years, who of the UDFAs will emerge like a Ben Neiman or a Byron Pringle or a Turk Wharton? You can go right down the line, and that'll be interesting, something to watch over the next several days if you're a Chiefs fan.
So one thing I found interesting when we were talking to Brett on one of our shows a few days ago is that when the 7th round rolls around, they're obviously looking at the players that are still available, but they're already trying to figure out who are the UDFAs going to be. And he said that when we target UDFAs, these are guys who we would have drafted if we had a pick at whatever spot in the 7th round. These are players that they see as an extension of the draft. They're not just free agents. They're draft picks in their mind. And you find guys that have traits or skills or things that interest you that, once again, with the Kaindoh point, that you can get your coaches their arms around them and really unleash their skills and their talents. And you mentioned a few guys that have been really solid UDFAs for this team. Byron Pringle made some big plays for this team. Tershawn Wharton, based on PFF metrics, was the #2 defensive lineman, rookie defensive lineman in all of football last year in terms of pressures, behind Chase Young, the rookie of the year. So incredible getting Tershawn Wharton out of Missouri S&T, finding that guy. But Trevarius Ward, he was a UDFA from a few years ago. We didn't actually sign him out of the draft. The Cowboys did, but we identified him and traded for him. But he's a starting corner in this league. Ben Neiman mentioned him. How about Tim Ward? Made some big plays in Week 17 of last year. So you can find guys that can do stuff for you as UDFAs. And we can't talk about those guys right now, as you mentioned, not official yet. But there will be at least one guy in this UDFA class that makes a big play this season that helps the Chiefs win a game. I guarantee you that.
So that'll be coming up for you to peruse over the next 48 hours. And again, curious to see if Brett Veach will acknowledge it here in just a couple of minutes as he goes to the podium. And again, some of that is to follow protocol. They have to clear physicals and the like. But the other thing, to be good in UDFAs, it's really a simulation of college recruiting. Because that phone call the Chiefs are making to that group they would have drafted in the 7th round, to use your point, that's not the only phone call they're getting. Okay, you haven't been drafted. Now several teams have got you on their board, and they're trying to get you to come into their program. And that's why it gives you a sense of just security in what Brett Veach and that scouting staff, one, they know who to call right away. They've got them targeted. and to also be in a position to have those guys recruited that they choose you over choosing something else. We see free agency. It's for all to see when you get into the unrestricted free agents, when that opens in mid-March and the crazy time of those 2-3 weeks when people are flying around. We all see that. What we do not see are the undrafted college free agents that it requires to recruit them. And that's where Brett Veach and his staff has proven time and time again, and really Coach Andy Reid and what the culture that he's brought here over the 8 years, that they're good recruiters and developers.
That culture is an important point because the Chiefs are a deep team at virtually everywhere. They're a team that's gone to back-to-back Super Bowls and 3 straight AFC title games. Have to be deep to do that really throughout your roster. So think about it from a perspective of a UDFA. You can look at the roster and go, man, there's a lot of good players on this team. It'd be really easy for me to go to a team that's not as good where I have a chance to maybe crack the roster and start. But it's the culture and the coaching staff here. They're like, I'd rather go to a team that's deep where I can truly learn from the best and figure out how I can be great. I'm going to go there and see what I can do. And sometimes it pays off. Guys like Turk Wharton, they can break the starting lineup at defensive tackle out of Missouri S&T because they truly wanted the greatness from this coaching staff. Let's go to the podium now. Here is Chiefs General Manager Brett Veach.
Welcome 6 new draft selections to the Kingdom. Currently working through some free agent contracts after the draft, and won't be able to comment on those guys. But once we get those guys finalized, we'll certainly be able to discuss those guys and how they fit into the grand scheme of things. But again, really exciting weekend for us. Definitely want to say thank you to my entire scouting staff. Again, just a tremendous job all year. The coaching staff, all the IT people, everyone involved in this whole process here. There's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes, and these guys are the best at what they do. So again, couldn't be more excited by the outcome of this draft, and looking forward to getting these guys into the facility next week and kicking off this rookie minicamp soon and seeing these guys in action. So with that, I'll open up and take your questions.
Let's go first to Sam Mellinger. Go ahead, Sam.
Hey, Brett. This isn't necessarily draft specific, but I'm just wondering, does the 17th game, does that change at all your approach to draft, free agency, just kind of roster building in general?
I mean, it just puts more of an emphasis on what we already know, and that's just the battle of attrition. And you know, it's so hard to stay healthy in this league, and you can have a good team, but you know, we saw it last year. If you can't make it to the end and you don't have, you know, enough depth, it's certainly going to come into play. So we're always looking for ways to build that depth, and we put a high priority on our practice squad. And that's why I think when you look at our roster during the season, we're always active in regards to changing out our practice squads and keeping an eye on that. But it's just going to put more emphasis on making sure that we have guys in place to fulfill that next man up mentality and continue to identify you know, young prospects that can quickly grow and develop and be ready for when their number's called.
Let's go next to Pete Sweeney. Go ahead, Pete.
Hey, Brett. Just wanted to ask you about the one trade you guys made for Noah Gray to trade up with the Jets. I was wondering if you just walk through why it was necessary to go there, and then just your comments on why you wanted the player so badly.
Well, you know, I didn't think, I shouldn't say we as a staff, I wasn't sure that this tight end class was super deep. Certainly everyone had Pitts there at the top of the board. I think that there was talent, though, throughout the draft. These guys were a little bit more, some guys were primary blockers, some guys had a receiving skill set. And early on, we took a liking to Noah Gray and just saw him as a really unique inside slot receiver, H-back, fullback. He's a little undersized for, you know, being an inline player, but it's so hard to replace Travis when he's not in the game because he has such a unique skill set. And Noah has a similar, again, you don't want to compare anyone to Travis Kelce, but Noah has a unique skill set as a slot, bigger tight end receiver. Looking at the board and kind of working through that, you know, Josh Kaindoh was a guy that, you know, we were certainly interested in. And once we fulfilled that kind of need there at defensive end with Josh, we quickly looked at the board and, you know, we knew that we wouldn't be able to get up all that high. So once we got into that range where we felt we can do a flopping of picks that would get us up, we were going to be aggressive. So we just had to wait. So we were literally waiting for 15, 20, 25 picks to go by. We had 2 different deals in place. We actually had the Jets at first, they weren't committing to the move. I think there was a team behind them that said they would commit to the move. And we had just said that if our guy was still on the board, we'd be interested. Once Jets got on the clock, they called us back and they said they would be interested. But we were really identifying that trade probably about 20 picks ahead. We were just waiting. We just couldn't get into that range. We didn't want to surrender a pick. We could have moved up even higher by just surrendering a flat pick, but we wanted to work in volume, and we identified a few teams that were willing to swap picks, and we were okay with shifting down later and allowing a team to come up higher later if we can move up a little in that fifth. But that was a guy that is, again, as soon as we selected Josh Kaindoh, we had our eyes locked on. We called Josh and we welcomed him to the kingdom. And then as soon as we got off the phone, we were back in the draft room on the phone, calling every team to see how we can flop picks, get back up there and get Noah.
Let's go next to Tyrann Petro. Go ahead, Tyrann.
Brett, the second round, grabbing a center, you guys did a lot of work, obviously, in filling that position. You talked about kind of a sweet spot being that mid-second, maybe down to like mid-third, or at least top of the third. Was there any conversation about maybe trading down, and the fact that it was, you've turned that offensive line strength into the offensive line position into kind of a strength now, to then go and put more resources into it? I would think that, maybe you didn't think Creed was going to be there, and maybe that changed how you were going to do the dynamics.
Yeah, we were fielding calls, I would say about 6 to 8 picks before our selection at 58 and at 62. We had a couple teams offer potential trade down scenarios. Tyrann, they never really materialized though. And then once we got on the clock and typically when teams call you, the deals are good. When you call teams, the deals are bad, right? So early on, before 58, we had some calls and we were monitoring some situations, and we were potentially open to doing that. As those 5 or 6 picks went by, the one team kind of backed out on what they proposed, and then there was no calls. And at that point, again, once you start making calls, then that means you're willing to take less in value. And then factor that in with having a guy like Nick Bolton on the board at 58, great player. And then again at 62, Creed Humphrey. I mean, the value was just way too good. Certainly both those players we're really excited about and very fortunate to get.
Let's go next to Herbie Teope. Go ahead, Herbie.
Hey, Brett. Good morning.
Good morning, Herbie. How you doing?
Hey, I'm well, thanks. You guys didn't draft a safety this year. How much of that is a sign of confidence? A Mathieu extension could be done sooner than later.
Well, look, I had mentioned earlier before, once we get through the free agency process and the draft, we'll sit down and last year, we were able to get a lot of our veteran players done during the summer, and enough can't be said about Tyrann and how we feel about him and his role both on and off the field here. But look, I mean, I had said earlier that once we were able to execute the Orlando Brown trade, that it really just opened us up to taking the best player available. And that was kind of the mentality we worked this entire weekend. We were just going to stay true to the board. We felt that, once free agency ends, you really like to go in the draft knowing that you can go out there and play in a game. And so again, once the left tackle position was filled, we felt like we can stay true to the board, take the best player available, because again, perceived needs this year, has no indication of what the need will be next year. And we're trying to build continuity and build for the long haul here. And again, as I mentioned, hopefully something gets done with Orlando. So you have him under contract for a while, Joe Thuney under contract for a while, and now Creed Humphrey under contract for a while. So if you work with that mentality, take the best player available, you're going to have these guys under contract for 4 or 5 years. And again, once we were able to solidify that left tackle position, we really just stayed true to the board and took the best player available at every position.
Next to Adam Teicher. Go ahead, Adam.
Hey, Brett, how you doing today?
Hey, Adam, how you doing?
Good. Hey, Brett, was just wondering when the plan for the offensive line started to come together. I mean, I can't imagine that you got together the day after the Super Bowl and said, hey, we got to do something here. So just curious if you can sort of take us through a timeline, a little bit of what your thinking was as the time went on, and then into free agency and even through this weekend when you got 2 players. And Brad, I'll have one more question as well.
Well, I mean, really, I would say that the plan had always been in place. And even at the start of the season, Austin Ryder was going to be a free agent. And, certainly Eric Fisher and Mitchell Schwartz were both getting up there in regards to years experience and playing in the league. So I think our eye was always on that as our college guys are on the road. And as we started to meet in free agency in that process, and even before Fish got hurt, when we met, I think in early December or late November, our blueprint early on was, we're going to really solidify some offensive line play in regards to tackle depth, interior depth, and where can we find value in free agency. Now, certainly that plan got put into ultra gear after Fish got hurt, and then it was made aware to us that Mitch was going to get off-season surgery. It was on our radar the whole time, but I think the level of urgency just really picked up as soon as Eric got hurt and we got word that Mitch was going to get surgery. So again, I would say that was probably going to be our priority anyway in the offseason. We probably doubled down a little bit, knowing that some of the veterans that we anticipated back wouldn't be back either.
Okay, thanks. And also, and I know you said up at the top that you really weren't ready to talk about at least some of your undrafted guys that you signed. Does that go for all the guys? Because there's one I had a particular question about. Would that go for all of them?
Yeah, I mean, typically once we get them under contract, these guys are going to come in here and have to get a physical, and then we'll get them under contract.
Fair enough.
Yeah, but once those guys sign, we'll certainly make them available, and we'll be happy to talk about them.
Fair.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go next to Mick Schaefer. Go ahead, Mick.
Hey, Brett, just wondering, Trey Smith in the 6th round, what kind of value you think you got from him at that point?
Yeah, obviously we feel we got tremendous value, extremely talented player, great person too, smart. So listen, there's been a lot of talk about Trey and his fall, and I'm not a doctor, so I don't really want to speak on in regards to his conditions, but I think Mike Berganzi was on the other day and he spoke about it. We did a lot of work with him, in particular, Mike Monaco. He has, I'll probably defer to Rick on this because I don't want to screw up the language, but, he had a situation he was going through and he tried some different medications and some of them worked, some of them didn't, but really put a lot of faith and trust in Rick and in his training staff. And then I would say that of all the players throughout this draft process, I don't think I spoke to Mike Monaco more about than Trey Smith. We had a ton of dialogue with him, and Mike was involved a lot in that process, not just with me and my staff and Rick and his staff, but also the people at the University of Tennessee, Trey's agent, Trey himself. So, Mike did a really good job of making sure he had all the information and again, safety's the most important thing for us. And, I would say that in general, we're probably one of the more conservative staffs there are in regards to any gray. We're probably taking people off our board. So I knew early on that when Mike thought he had an idea of how to fix this, I thought that we were really onto something because again, any area gray, we're usually taking the player off the board because we don't want to put players in that position here in Kansas City. So feel good about the work we did on him. And again, if everything works out, you're getting a guy that obviously would have been drafted a lot higher, got tremendous upside with him. So we're looking forward to getting him here and having Mike and our trainers work with him and getting him up to speed and seeing if we can tap into all that potential.
Looks like we've got 3 hands up. We'll go right down the line, starting with Todd Lebo. Go ahead, Todd.
Hey, Brett, I wonder if you have any clarity yet on what the next couple of weeks will look like for these rookies, if you're going to get to have them here, have in person, and then if you've had any conversations with the leadership of your veteran team on whether or not they're going to be virtual or showing up for the OTAs yet.
Yeah. So as far as, the conversation with the leadership and the OTAs, Coach Reed's handling that with Pat and Tyrann and those guys. And obviously our staff was just, working on the draft. As far as I know, and these rookies should be in here next week and we should get this rookie camp off next week. So anticipating all these guys arriving here Wednesday, Thursday, getting a physical, getting geared up and getting out there and going through the first install as a member of the Kansas City Chiefs.
We'll go next to Sam McDowell. Go ahead, Sam.
Hey, Brett. When we talked to Ryan Nutt on Saturday, he mentioned that Powell was a guy that could be more of a post-up player. I'm just wondering, did you identify that as maybe a need for you guys, or was he just sort of the next receiver on your board and that happens to be his qualities?
It kind of worked out in both regards. He was, again, going back to the mindset we worked all weekend, he was the best player available, but he, ironically enough, did fill that kind of post-up position. He's a 6 foot 210 212-pound receiver. He's big, strong, physical. The production-wise, I mean, he had a monster year this year, but leading up to that, the production wasn't always there. He had some injuries that he dealt with, and obviously Clemson has a lot of talent. This year, he really kind of tapped into, that potential. And if you look at the second half of his season last year, that was good as any wideout in the country. I mean, he was just ripping off big game after big game, and certainly showed what he can do versus Notre Dame and in the bowl game versus Ohio State. So love his skill set. And for where we are on our roster with McCole and with Tyreek, he's going to be a great complement, as an ex-receiver, got big size, really good after the catch, strong player. So just think it's a great fit and great value there. And we're excited to work with him and see how he can add to an already dynamic offense.
And we'll go last to Matt Derrick. Go ahead, Matt.
Hey, Brett, thanks for the time as always.
Hey, Matt, how you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. You'd mentioned, you briefly touched on Joshua Kaindoh earlier. But just curious, he's obviously has incredible skills and athleticism, tested through the roof. But, how do you kind of feel like he is as far as his development and maturity goes at this point? And how do you kind of visualize him fitting into the DN rotation this year?
Well, this is a prototypical Steve Spagnuolo DN right here. I mean, 6'5", 265, 268, 35 and 3/8 inch arm, I think. I mean, he's long, athletic. He has some work to do in regards to his development. So he had an injury a couple of years ago that really put him back. He had an ankle injury, I believe in 19. Was off to a really good, maybe it was 19 or 20. I guess it was 2 years ago. I'm losing track of my years here. But a couple of years ago, he had an ankle injury, was off to a hot start, set him back. And then sometimes those injuries are slow, make it more difficult for you to return. And, he had some lingering effects off that into this season. But again, going back to the medical staff and the work we've done, like the way that that's healed up now. And again, he's a guy that has a ton of potential, but his size, length, and overall skill set is exactly what we're looking for. Great kid, smart, will catch on quick. So we think he'll come in here and fit in right away. And, I think the more he gets to be with Brendan Daly in that defensive line room, we think that talent will come out. But I mean, we're excited to work with him skill set wise. I mean, he has all the tools you look for at that position.
Brett, we really appreciate the time. Thanks for joining us.
Sure. Thank you, guys.
You can tell Brett Veach is excited about this draft class. He's also excited because the Delaware Blue Hens advanced in the FCS playoffs, which is being played this spring because of COVID, took it out in the fall. But let's go through each one of the 6 drafted players and dig in just a little bit more, maybe beyond the obvious with these guys. And let's start with Nick Bolton. We're so excited about this guy and what he means, not only having impact in 2021, but down the road for several years. But one thing I liked about him, when you look at his high productivity, we talked about him leading the SEC in tackles, but 74 of those tackles in 2019 were solo tackles, Matt. Solo tackles. And then I look at what he did in 2018 when he had 8 tackles at Alabama. So productivity, but productivity in ways that you want from an inside backer in the league. And he did it in some of the biggest games.
I mean, the guy's a total package at linebacker. Total package. You mentioned this, led the SEC in defensive stops at linebacker in each of the last 2 seasons. Incredible. It's the SEC. We're not talking about a smaller conference or something like that. The SEC, he was the most productive linebacker that each of the last 2 years. And the guy's an energy giver. He's out there always giving it his all. Seeing these highlights here, look at this guy. I mean, he's everywhere, always around the football, making plays. Making plays is really the thing that stands out to me about him. And now you can have him and Willie Gay Jr. grow together in this defense over the next several years. All the areas the Chiefs have addressed over the last 5 or 6 years, linebacker is one of those spots where it's been a lot of veteran players, a lot of players that are maybe UDFAs. We haven't really seen second-round picks growing at linebacker on this team, and now we have 2 of them growing next to one another for years to come.
We saw his coverage skills there, too, in the highlights. He was a game wrecker against West Virginia. He just totally obliterated those guys. The knock on him is undersized, but inside linebackers being undersized, hey, there's some in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. when they say undersized, it's his height. I mean, he's not a 6'3" kid, but I just see great things from him and his leadership, his ability to contribute right away in special teams. There's a lot to like with the Nick Bolton pick.
That special teams is really the name of the game here, because you look at it, you say, well, is he going to play a ton on defense? We don't know. We don't know what the plan is, but we know for sure he's going to play a lot on special teams. And special teams can help win you games. He'll bring that same attitude he brought to defense at Mizzou to special teams early in his career. And whatever happens with the plan, we know at some point he'll be wreaking havoc out there on defense, covering guys, getting after the quarterback, being an energy giver on this defense.
And the whole mentor, Mr. Miyagi, old school reference thing of Alex Smith, Patrick Mahomes, he gets that with Anthony Hitchens, who is a willing teacher. Second, let's go to Creed Humphrey now, the center from the University of Oklahoma. And what's beyond the obvious here is the fact that we alluded to it earlier in the show, is his ability to rally that whole team. They were in trouble. They lost to K-State. They're thinking their season could unravel. They rallied to win the Big 12. And so he was a big part of that team, no pun intended. He can snap it with both hands. There's just a lot of mental and physical toughness to this guy. And the fact that he was such an outstanding wrestler, don't snicker at it, because those skill sets are great in the NFL, especially for a center.
He was a wrestler through middle school until he realized he was pretty good at football as well. And you're right, he is a big man at 6'5", 320 pounds, playing center. I mean, that's just crazy. And we mentioned this in the front end, has that versatility to play guard as well, which is just huge. But what I love about this guy is we mentioned his leadership and the guys rally around him. It's important to have those intangibles, but you also have to be good for people to follow you and listen to you. And in 2,488 snaps at Oklahoma, showing his durability, you know how many sacks he allowed? Zero sacks allowed in all of those snaps at Oklahoma, facing some good Big 12 defensive lines. Really exciting stuff there. My hope is that he can form now a battery with Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes can grow now over the course of his young career, because Patrick Mahomes is still young, believe it or not. With a young center, they both can grow together and form that battery that we look back on in 20 years and say, man, those guys were attached to the hip. That was a battery that won, hopefully, several Super Bowls.
Think about how he spent his collegiate days. Hurts, Mayfield, Rattler. I mean, those are some big-time guys that were throwing a lot that he had to protect. And the A-gap is the closest ventricle to Patrick Mahomes' heart. And that was the biggest factor, in my opinion, in Super Bowl 55. The A-gap got obliterated. That is your main water line flooding the basement. Now, all of a sudden, you think that those two A-gaps are going to be protected to protect the Prince throwing the football. All right, let's go now to Kaindoh. A lot of topic of discussion in that press conference was Joshua Kaindoh, because this is a guy now that he might be the most mysterious guy of the six. And I say that as a compliment, because are you getting the next Tano Passanio, or are you getting something more?
So we talked to Coach Reed a few days ago, and he said that coaches pride themselves in being teachers, and that's true. What are the two things, though, that teachers cannot teach? Size and athleticism. And this guy has both of those. So we mentioned it on the front end. He is 6'6", 260 pounds with 34.5-inch arms. That is absolutely crazy length. But when you have that length and the athleticism to pair with it, that makes your skills truly special. So bear with me here. I'm trying to illustrate what a freak athlete this guy is. The advanced metrics have a stat called the relative athletic score. I don't know how they calculate it, guys smarter than me, but they have these numbers. It basically rates your raw athleticism in a vacuum compared with others at your position over the last several decades, since 1987, as a matter of fact. His score ranked 59th among more than 1,300 defensive ends since 1987. That illustrates what a great athlete this guy is. And while the production maybe wasn't there at Florida State, and Brett mentioned he had some injuries, you can't teach that athleticism. So what can you teach? Technique, how to get after the passer. You get him in this building, get the coaches working with him. Sky's really the limit for this kid. I'm really excited to see what he can do.
Yeah, we showed you that wicked pick six that he had against North Carolina. That gives you an idea of his athleticism. Plus, you look at his early part of his career, 17 and 18, when 24 games played for FSU, 7 sacks, and looking at 11 tackles for losses. People are saying there was productivity. It was early before that ankle injury and the other injuries that he faced at FSU. So what do we get there? We don't know, but we're soon to find out over the next several months. All right, let's move on. This, as far as potential, the next pick in Noah Gray, the tight end out of Duke, and there was a lot of discussion in the Brett Veach news conference about him, because they were asked, they traded up to get him. Why trade up to get him? He talked about the overall tight end class. You and I kind of broke that down on Thursday and Friday, but they thought enough to go get him because they not to say he's Travis Kelce. He wore 87 at Duke. But there's some skills here that you find that are unique that give you maybe some insurance for Kelce or a third tight end that Coach Reed can use with his imagination.
Well, and first of all, another weapon for Patrick Mahomes. That's always good. We'll take as many of those guys as we can get, but you're right. We mentioned his versatility earlier. Let's run through it again here because it's very important. In 2020 at Duke, he played 237 snaps in the slot as a wide receiver, 139 snaps in line, and 120 snaps out of the backfield as an H-back, fullback kind of player. So think of all the different things you can do with this guy. So Travis Kelce has missed, 0 snaps in the last several years. The guy's always healthy, always out there. So your hope is that you don't need to have Noah Gray always filling that Travis Kelce role early on in his career because Kelce is healthy. If that's the case, you can put him on special teams. He's a madman out there. You can put him as a fullback in the backfield, maybe replacing that Anthony Sherman role. He can do different things for you, and God forbid if Travis Kelce is injured or needs a breather, you can put him out there in the slot and you can rely on him on 107 catchable targets over the course of his career, just 3 drops. I mean, the guy was sure-handed, a lot of underneath throws, but I believe his potential as maybe a receiver down the field also could really be unleashed here in Coach Reed's system. So this kid can do a lot of different things for you, and when you have Travis Kelce, who we've talked about a lot here, perhaps the greatest tight end of all time teaching you, again, sky is the limit.
And again, think a little bit of sausage here. Remember the helicopter flying away after a great career in Anthony Sherman. Anthony Sherman did so much to help this team. Whether it was special teams, he could play fullback. He was the third tight end a lot. And now when you look at Noah Gray, you just mentioned it. All of a sudden you could see him filling in to being the third tight end, an H-back, and being a really good special teams contributor, and that could start right away in week 1 of the 2021 season.
And also his blocking. His blocking is something you can rely on. Became a better blocker over the course of his career at Duke. We're talking about the remaking of the offensive line, all these great players up front, but if you can have a guy like Noah Gray who checks in at, I believe, 240 pounds, if he can block as well and be an athletic receiver on this team when you need him to be, it's pretty exciting versatility to have at tight end.
Yeah, excited about Noah Gray. There's more there than meets the eye, as we talked to you about earlier in the show. Plus, he's super smart. You hear that interview he had? It's like Duke. Okay. Now, the next draftee is a guy that I'm getting more excited about. Yeah, I watched him when you were seeing Clemson play in those big games. But if you dive into Cornell Powell, again, he may not be in the Legion of Zoom 4x100 meter team, but he's going to run the 4x4. And what I get excited about, and Brett Veach talked about it at the end of his news conference that we had for you, his ability, numbers on the field painted to the boundary. His ability, go watch his back shoulder catches against Clemson, either from Trevor Lawrence or the guy that filled in for him. And then his ability to high point the football. Something that this receiver core could use.
I'm pumped about this kid. You're seeing his highlights here. You mentioned it. He high points the ball, and he's physical, a physical wide receiver. And we've talked about in our pre-draft coverage, maybe finding a big physical wide receiver that can be a boundary guy. Use him in the red zone, things like that. And I believe this kid can do that. Look at his breakout season in 2020 when he finally had an opportunity with injuries behind him, and there's so many, Brett mentioned this, so much talent at wide receiver at Clemson. Finally got his shot, made the most of it. 53 catches for 882 yards and 7 touchdowns, 4 grabs of 50 or more yards last season. He had at least 1 grab of 20 or more yards in 7 of his final 8 games, and 7 contested catches on balls thrown at least 10 yards downfield. Once again, I believe this is a player who could develop into a red zone threat, a physical guy that Patrick Mahomes can throw the football up and he can go up and grab it. He showed that in 2020, and that year he really had a chance to show what he can do. And also one more thing, Dabo Swinney, the great head coach at Clemson, they took it out of their time to message our PR staff and send them a note, a quote about what they thought of him. That's how much they thought of him. They wanted to send a note to us about him, mentioning how the light bulb really came on for him in 2020. And for me, for Dabo to go out of his way to let us know you're getting a great kid who's figuring everything out at just the right time, and we can't wait to see where he can go, that's very exciting.
And Matt, a couple things here as we close it out on Cornell Powell. Did dig into him. You mentioned he flourished at the end of his career. The 6 catches for 161 yards, we just showed you some of those plays he made at Notre Dame. I mean, that was a big game against a big opponent. He had to make plays. The 176 yards against Pitt, he just crushed them. And then the 90 yards he had against Virginia Tech. But here's what also goes beyond the obvious here, and this goes back to maybe the Dabo Swinney quote. He stayed there 5 years. He's 23 years old. Most of the guys in this draft were 20 years old. This is a 23-year-old kid who stayed at Clemson and fought through it. You think about Hunter Renfrow was in that wide receiver room. Mike Williams of the Chargers was in that room. You look, who am I leaving out here?
Name them, tons of guys.
Tons of guys, but he had to wait his turn. What could he have done? Just click and drag. That's all you need to do in the transfer portal now. Just click and drag, and I'm out of here. He stayed. He fought through it and flourished at the end. And to me, that means a lot. I should have put him on. Why do I like this guy so much? Because he would fit that category.
We talk about some other guys in different situations, like Mike Dana or Jabril Cox, who is from Kansas City, and the Cowboys got him. Mm-hmm. We respected them because they were grad transfers that challenged themselves at maybe a higher level school. They transferred from a smaller school, went to a bigger school to see what they could do at the next level, get them ready for the NFL. This is a similar comparison. Even though he stayed at Clemson, you can't go any higher than Clemson. But he could have transferred to a smaller school or a place where he'd get all the targets and everything, and he'd get this huge volume of numbers. But he's like, no. Gets back to my UDFA point about this coaching staff here in Kansas City. I'm going to stay here no matter all the talent that's here and show these guys what I can do when I have my opportunity. It paid off, and now he's a Chief.
Cornell Powell, again, there may be more there than meets the eye. And he gets to played with Trevor Lawrence. Now he gets to play with Patrick Mahomes.
Pretty good.
Good life for Cornell. And then finally, Trey Smith. It might be the most value of all value picks, not only for the Chiefs, but in the draft. When you look at this guy and you watch him on video, Matt, you see, why isn't this guy a first or second round guy? Let's be honest, they're the medicals. And we got into that discussion, or at least Brett Veach did. But Trey Smith could be a star eventually on this team.
So excited about this guy, too. So my grandpa is a Vol for life. He's lived in Tennessee his whole life, loves the Tennessee Volunteers. He texted me on Thursday and said, Matt, the Chiefs have got to get Trey Smith tomorrow in day 2 of the draft. I'm like, all right, Grandpa, I don't make any decisions here. Then we draft him in the 6th round. I'm like, Grandpa, we went out and got him and found him in the 6th round. You're absolutely right. I believe, and it's not just us, a lot of third-party people think this as well, he could be the absolute steal of the draft. And this is why you have your medical staff. They feel good about these things. They say, yeah, we can figure this out. Let's take a chance on this guy. And so you put that aside. You trust your medical staff there and look at the talent of the player. And this guy is so talented. What he did in his career could have been a 3rd-round pick, is what many experts thought he would be in this draft because of his play on the field. He can play all over the place, as we mentioned earlier. Left tackle, either guard spot, right tackle. He's huge, 6'5", 321 pounds. And over the course of his final 2 seasons, fighting through that medical stuff, 754 pass blocking snaps, just 1 sack allowed, and 4 quarterback hits. It's even more talent for this remade offensive line, and another reason why I can't wait to see minicamp and training camp and all this stuff to figure out who is going to be the starting 5, because there's so many guys vying for those spots at this point. Talented, durable, versatile players. I can't wait.
What's more than meets the eye, the kingdom is going to love Trey Smith. He wears a cowboy hat. He was called the cowboy hat guy at Tennessee. He loves to hunt and fish. And he might be governor of Tennessee someday, or governor of Kansas, Nebraska, Missouri, or Iowa. Super smart. But when you dig into Trey Smith, the impact that he had in Knoxville at the University of Tennessee, what he did from a community service standpoint, as much as the Chiefs emphasize it, you're not going to have to convince Trey Smith to do it. This guy will be a natural leader throughout his whole life. That's where he's impressive, and he fits right in with the genre of this 6-man 2021 draft class.
So in 2019, I believe he won the Fritz Pollard Award and the Jason Witten Man of the Year Award. Both awards go to men in college football. One man, I believe, that exemplifies extraordinary courage and leadership both on and off the field. That sounds pretty good, doesn't it? You want that kind of guy in your locker room? And the thing here with Trey Smith, he knows how good he is. He knows how talented he is. He knows he should have gone earlier in this draft. He's going to be hungry to show all the teams that passed on him, you should have taken me early on. That's exciting if you're a Chiefs fan.
As we close, let me give you a big compliment here, Matt. It is fun to do these shows with you. 1, you're incredibly prepared, but 2, you roll. Because I can't tell you how many times, we can have a plan, but it's like the game. It's like doing play-by-play where, whoop, it's off the rails. We are off the rails. And so we got to figure this out. But it's been fun to do that. So excellent job.
Well, thank you, Mitch. It's been the thrill of my life doing this with you. Looking forward to doing lots more of this stuff with you moving forward and reacting to our picks live with the Kingdom, finding out you and me at the same time they all do. This has been so much fun. I'm so excited about this draft. And now we can take a nap, maybe. What do you think?
I'll tell you what, I crashed Saturday night. I was like, wow, what just happened? But now we got to get retooled and get ready for the next thing, which is rookie minicamp, right? And then look at these young undrafted free agents. But I also want to give a shout out to our entire 65 TPT crew. This is when it shines. Anna Topkin and the work she has done to put all of this together, going right down the line with whether Brad Young or Glenn Conley or Dane Van Wy, just going down John Matthews, and Luke Benna was in Cleveland, and I'm going to leave somebody out, and I'm sorry if I leave anybody out, but when I see this team come together, because they invest a lot of their time, and the time meaning there's a lot of personal time that's involved in this too. It's not you just punch in and leave and the time clock. But the effort and the enthusiasm, knowing what the kingdom wants and over-delivering is something I'm extremely proud to be a part of. We have an awesome team here at 65 TPT, and we're getting ready. Don't you feel like the season started?
Yeah.
Like it's now going. 2021, let's roll and get to Super Bowl 56 and get to LA.
Yeah, it feels that way. I'm so ready for football season. I mean, after the Super Bowl, we all want to get back to football again to show that we're the best team in football, but you have to wait a long time. In February and March, you're kind of sitting around, but we're getting into it now. We're in the building. We're getting ready for the football season, and before we know it, it's going to be training camp, and I cannot wait.
And great to see the fans again at draft day. Don't want to leave Kristen Pugh. She set all that up. Draft day, we brought that to you. But just to see the fans and have Arrowhead open again was like, yeah, maybe we're getting back to normal. And here's what excites me. Can you imagine Coach winning his second Super Bowl in his hometown?
Oh, yeah.
I'm ready for that.
I'm ready for that, too.
He's Matt McMullen. He is the inventor of the Matt stat, as you know. Follow him. Chiefs reporter. I'm Mitch Holthus, voice of the Chiefs. Stay with us, folks. We're going to keep you rolling here at 65 TPT on all of our platforms and all of our shows and all of our features. But thanks especially for following us over the past several days in bringing you the latest and greatest of the Kansas City Chiefs 2021 draft as we get ready to head to another Super Bowl and win it like we did in Super Bowl 54.